She crossed the world with a shattered heart and a suitcase full of silence. She told no one, left no notes. She simply vanished from Paris as if trying to outrun her own shadow. Her name? Livia Andrade. A young Brazilian fashion designer, just 29 years old, who traded the glamour of European runways for the chaotic, indecipherable streets of Tokyo. And all because she was betrayed by the two people she loved most in the world, her fiancé and her best friend. But what she didn't expect was that, by running from the past, she would stumble into the future. Today's story isn't just about betrayal, nor is it about an unlikely romance. It's about courage. About a wounded woman who, in the midst of emotional chaos, found light in a place where she didn't speak the language, knew no one, and didn't even know what she was searching for. It's about how a broken heart can find shelter in the arms of another that also bleeds, even if that happens on the other side of the world. Imagine waking up in a city where no one knows your name, where neon signs flash in a language you barely understand, where every corner hides a new possibility or a new mistake. It was in this landscape of colors, sounds, and solitude that Livia arrived, alone, in the heart of Shibuya. She had no plan, no address, not even an emotional map to guide her. All she knew was that she needed to disappear, not from others, but from herself. On the very night she arrived, still jet-lagged, aimless and hopeless, she entered an elegant bar on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper. She ordered a strong drink and a moment of peace. That's when fate, with its disconcerting precision, decided to move its pieces. Sitting next to her, a mysterious man with a melancholic gaze and a perfectly tailored suit seemed to carry the same kind of emptiness. His name? Ethan Nakamura. Japanese, 34 years old, heir to a financial empire and prisoner of an arranged marriage. A man who had everything, except freedom. Two strangers, two escapes, two pasts that hurt like open wounds. All it took was an impromptu toast, a lingering glance, a conversation laced with shy laughter and raw truths. And there, between glasses and confessions, a connection was born. Not the kind that comes with promises, but the kind that simply happens. Like rain that falls without asking permission. They didn't ask many details about each other. They didn't want to know too much. Maybe because in that moment, what mattered most wasn't the past that had broken them, but the relief of finally finding someone who didn't demand explanations. Livia, always so rational and in control, did the unthinkable. She proposed a symbolic wedding, like a bad joke, a way to seal the night as a secret pact between two fugitives. Ethan said yes. And so it was, in a themed chapel in the center of Tokyo, under neon lights and with a crowd of curious tourists, that two strangers said, "I do," without love, without a plan, without a destination, just with the hope of forgetting, for one night, everything that hurt. What had started as a reckless escape would soon become something much bigger, because what Livia and Ethan didn't know yet was that, in that moment, they had exchanged not just symbolic rings, but the keys to a new life. A life that would defy traditions, break expectations, and transform pain into a new beginning. Get ready. Because this story isn't about neatly wrapped happy endings. It's about how sometimes the most unlikely new beginning can be born from the depths of the abyss, and what was meant to be just one night would become an eternal bond. The sun had already risen when they left the chapel, but Tokyo seemed to never sleep. The neon still flickered on a few buildings, and the early morning air had a bittersweet taste of regret and relief. Livia and Ethan walked side by side through the nearly empty streets, laughing about silly things, like two teenagers who had done something crazy and didn't yet know if they'd pay a heavy price for it. But deep down, they knew. And maybe that's what made it all feel even more real. She looked at him with curiosity. There was something about Ethan that disarmed her. It wasn't just his quiet charm or the way he always seemed in control, even when admitting he had no idea what to do with his own life. It was the way he listened to her, as if he genuinely cared, as if her pain had value, They sat on a park bench, holding hot coffees from one of Tokyo's countless vending machines. Neither of them wanted to go back to the hotel. Neither wanted to break that fragile bubble of honesty that had surrounded them since the first toast. And it was there, in that shared silence, that they began to talk. Truly talk. Ethan spoke about the constant pressure of being the heir to Nakamura Global, about the laughterless lunches, the dinners served with contracts instead of dessert, birthdays traded for meetings, and the crushing expectations of his mother, about the arranged marriage approaching like a runaway train, where love was irrelevant and convenience was the only invitation. Livia, in turn, spoke of Paris, of the thrill of having carved out a place for herself as a designer, of the sketches she used to draw in secret as a child, and of the almost physical pain she felt when she discovered that Matteo, her fiancé, and Izumi, her best friend, were together and planning to get married in secret after months of hidden betrayal. It was like having the ground ripped out from under her feet and still being forced to keep smiling for the world. When she finished, Ethan looked down, then up at her, and said something she would never forget. Maybe we just need a place where we don't have to be who everyone expects us to be. It was in that exact moment that Livia, perhaps driven by a mix of insomnia, rage, and adrenaline, looked at him and said, "What if we got married for real, just to see what it's like?" Ethan didn't laugh. He didn't back away either. He just looked into her eyes for a long few seconds, and then, as if it somehow made sense, and maybe it did, he replied with a simple, "Let's do it." The decision wasn't planned. There was no logic. Neither of them considered the consequences. It was a symbolic gesture, a rebellious act against everything that was crushing them. They entered a themed chapel decorated with artificial sakura flowers and a pastor in a burgundy suit reciting vows in broken English. They laughed, exchanged makeshift rings, and when they said "I do," they knew it wasn't a contract. It was a silent pact. You protect me from my pain, and I'll protect you from yours. After the ceremony, Ethan took Livia to a suite at the top of a 5-star hotel, where massive windows offered a breathtaking view of illuminated Tokyo. There were no promises, no rush, just two bodies trying to forget the weight of their memories. As the city outside began to wake, they fell asleep. Two strangers, bound by an impulsive decision. A marriage without a past or a future, yet. But somehow, it had already changed everything. Morning light filtered through the linen curtains of the suite when Livia slowly awoke, still dazed by a haze of wine, emotion, and exhaustion. For a brief moment, she thought it had all been an absurd dream. The images of the previous night returned in disjointed flashes. The bar, the easy laughter, the insane proposal, the chapel with its plastic flowers. And then, she sat up in bed, feeling the soft sheets against her skin and a sudden tightness in her chest. She looked around. She was in a place she didn't recognize, spacious and sophisticated, with minimalist furniture and a panoramic view of Tokyo. A modern lamp was still on. Nearby, on the nightstand, a tray held tea, fresh fruit, and a small handwritten note with her name on it. Before she could reach for the note, the bathroom door opened, and Ethan appeared, in a flawless suit, his hair still damp, his expression serene. He smiled, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, to wake up next to a stranger he had married in an impulsive night. But there was something more in his eyes, a restrained gravity, as if he carried a secret that could no longer wait. Livia, confused, murmured, "Ethan, where are we? What happened after the chapel?" He walked over to her, sat in the nearby armchair, and took a deep breath before speaking. "Livia, there's something I need to tell you. Last night, when I agreed to marry you, I didn't do it as a joke. I did it because it was my only way out." She frowned. "Way out of what?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then continued, his voice firm and sincere. "My full name is Ethan Hiroshi Nakamura. I'm the sole heir to Nakamura Global, a banking conglomerate headquartered in Kyoto with operations in over 20 countries. My family has been pressuring me for years to accept an arranged marriage with the daughter of a Chinese investor, a deal that would seal a multi-billion-dollar merger. And last night was supposed to be the engagement dinner. I ran away. The room seemed to shrink around Livia. The revelation hit like an avalanche. She stood up slowly, unsure of what to do with that information. So, you didn't tell me who you were. You used me to escape an engagement. Was that it from the beginning? No, he replied urgently. I didn't plan any of this. When I met you at that bar, I was just a tired man, a man who needed to breathe. And you were the first person in a long time who saw me without the weight of my name. I didn't want to deceive you, I just didn't want to scare you away. Livia stared at him, her heart racing. Part of her wanted to run, to disappear again. But another part remembered the conversations from the night before, the honesty in his eyes, the silent comfort they had found in each other. She took a deep breath and said, "If this is going to continue, if there's going to be a future, it has to be real. No secrets, no masks. I've already been betrayed enough by people who said they loved me." Ethan nodded, his eyes locked on hers. "I promise. Nothing hidden anymore. Only the truth." She stepped away from the window and sat in front of him. There were still doubts, fears, a storm inside her. But somehow, that revelation, as shocking as it was, made everything feel more real. The man who yesterday seemed like a stranger was now much more than she imagined. And even with fear in her chest, she decided to take a step toward the unknown. Because sometimes, what starts as an impulsive mistake can be the most sincere beginning of all. The transition from Tokyo to Kyoto happened in silence. During the bullet train ride, Livia watched through the window as the urban landscape gave way to mist-covered mountains and ancient temples. Beside her, quiet, seemingly respecting the space she needed. The comfort between them still existed, but now it was laced with a delicate tension, like a wire stretched between trust and doubt. Upon arriving at the Nakamura family estate, Livia understood, for the first time, the true scale of the world Ethan belonged to. The main gate opened to reveal a vast property surrounded by perfectly arranged stone gardens, koi-filled ponds, and wooden buildings with curved rooftops. It was like stepping into another universe where tradition and power walked hand in hand. The reception was cold. Mrs. Noriko Nakamura, Ethan's mother, waited for them at the main entrance, dressed in a dark, flawless kimono, her expression stern, as if she had already judged everything before a single word was spoken. She didn't offer any words of welcome. She simply examined Livia with her eyes, as if every detail were a personal affront. "So this is your wife?" she asked in a low, icy voice in Japanese. Ethan replied firmly, and although Livia couldn't understand all the words, the protective tone in his voice was unmistakable. Still, the feeling of being an intruder was impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, Livia found herself immersed in a reality she had never imagined living. The house functioned like a silent fortress, where every gesture was watched and every word carried weight. The press discovered the whirlwind wedding, and the headlines exploded. "Nakamura heir marries unknown Brazilian designer." The speculation was brutal. Fashion blogs called Livia an opportunist. Financial newspapers questioned her influence over the family's business. And Matteo's name began circulating again, bringing with it the poison. An old photo of Livia and Matteo in Paris was published by a European tabloid, insinuating that she had left everything behind to get involved with the billionaire heir out of interest. The backlash was immediate. Hateful comments, judgment, and endless questions flooded her social media. And to make matters worse, an unexpected message popped up on her phone. Izumi, the friend who had betrayed her, now claimed she wanted to talk, saying she missed her, felt guilty, regretted it all. Livia nearly gave in to despair. The past, which she thought she had left behind in Europe, was now chasing her with full force. She felt alone, out of place, like a piece that no longer fit the board. But once again, it was Ethan who grounded her. During a formal dinner at the Nakamura estate, with his mother, members of the company's board, and influential associates present, Ethan stood up after a sarcastic remark was made about Livia's humble origins. He looked straight at Noriko and, in Japanese, with a steady and controlled voice, defended his wife fiercely. He declared that honor wasn't found in blood or last names, but in the integrity of one's choices. He said Livia was the only person who had ever made him feel truly free, and for that, she would be respected in that house. The impact was immediate. An awkward silence fell over the table. Noriko said nothing, but her eyes revealed something new. For the first time, she saw Ethan's strength, and, through him, Livia's unbreakable presence. That night, alone in the inner garden under the soft glow of stone lanterns, Livia felt something shift. She was still a foreigner in that world, but no longer invisible. She had a voice. She had an ally. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to carve out her place there, not out of obligation, but because she deserved it. She knew the battle was just beginning. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel afraid. Mornings in Kyoto now began with a new rhythm. Instead of rushed coffee and wary glances, Livia woke up with purpose. In the quiet corridors of the Nakamura mansion, she no longer felt like a temporary guest. And although judgment still lingered, especially from Noriko, Livia had found something she never expected to discover there, a desire to begin again. One afternoon, while walking through the inner gardens, she sat beneath a cherry tree and opened her sketchbook. The pages still held old drafts, unfinished outlines of collections that had never made it to the runway. But now, the ideas flowed with a new intensity, as if her pain had transformed into color, texture, and form. For the first time since Paris, she allowed herself to create without fear, and with soul. It was Ethan who noticed the change in her eyes. During a casual dinner in the city, he watched her sketch on the edge of a napkin, talking about fabrics, cuts, and silhouettes as if she were stitching hope itself. And then, almost like someone proposing a business deal, but with the sweetness of someone offering freedom, he said, "Why don't you start again? But your way. Create something that's yours, right here." Livia hesitated. The Japanese elite was rigid, conservative. It accepted the new, yes, but only within limits. And she was a foreigner, young, and now the wife of a man whose public image was meticulously scrutinized. Still, the idea ignited something inside her. And so the project was born, a charity fashion show in Tokyo, aimed at supporting young artists and seamstresses who had lost their studios during the pandemic. A collection designed to tell her own story, but also to give voice to so many others. Ethan offered his full support. He made calls, opened contacts, secured venues, not to control, but because he believed in her. And there, side by side, through sleepless nights and intense meetings, they began to rebuild together. He handled the logistics. She handled the needles and ideas. The collection was named Nagai Michi, which means long road in Japanese. Each piece represented a stage: pain, loss, courage, and transformation. Light fabrics were mixed with heavy structures, metaphors for her own journey. And everything was handmade, with details inspired by origami and hints of Brazilian art. A bridge between her two worlds. But the elite was not kind. Columnists criticized her boldness. Fashion blogs questioned her talent, claiming she was only using the Nakamura name to promote herself. Noriko remained silent, neither supporting nor opposing, as if watching from afar, waiting for failure. Yet Livia stood her ground. On the day of the show, the venue in Ginza was transformed into a living gallery. Japanese and foreign models walked the runway with confidence, to a soundtrack that blended taiko drums with Brazilian rhythms. The audience watched in attentive silence, and then, in the end, rose to their feet in applause. The final piece, a reinterpreted kimono made with Brazilian lace and Japanese silk, received a standing ovation. And when Livia came out to thank the crowd, alongside the young seamstresses who had helped with the production, discreet tears slid down her cheeks. She hadn't just returned to the fashion world, she had etched her name into it, with purpose. In the audience, Ethan watched her with pride, but it was Noriko's unexpected gesture, rising to her feet and offering a subtle nod of approval, that marked the true triumph of the evening. Not for the sake of acceptance, but for the silent recognition. That night, among flashes and flowers, Livia was no longer just the wife of the Nakamura heir. She was an artist, a woman who had fallen, risen, and shone. It was autumn in Kyoto when the invitation arrived. A sleek black envelope, sealed with golden wax, containing the details of a charity event hosted by a European foundation focused on art and culture. Livia recognized the name of the organizer before even fully opening it. Matteo Ricci, her ex-fiancé, the man who had shattered her trust and turned Paris into a place too painful to remember. Ethan received the invitation at the same time, but unlike Livia, he read it with neutrality. He knew who Matteo was, knew the story in detail, but showed no discomfort. He simply asked, with a calm and direct gaze, "Do you want to go?" Livia hesitated. Part of her wanted to stay away, to protect the peace she had rebuilt with such effort. But another part, deeper, more resolute, knew that running away was just another form of captivity, and she was no longer willing to carry invisible chains. On the night of the event, the Imperial Hotel's grand ballroom in Kyoto radiated sophistication. Golden murals, delicate sculptures, and guests from Europe and Asia's high society filled the space. Livia wore a black silk dress with subtle golden embroidery, one of her own designs, her hair styled in an elegant updo. Ethan stood beside her, wearing a custom navy blue suit. Their entrance caused a stir. Everyone knew who they were. All eyes turned toward them. Livia breathed steadily, but her heart beat like a drum inside her chest. And then, the inevitable happened. Across the ballroom, Matteo appeared. Still charming, still as confident as ever, he walked toward her with a rehearsed smile and a nostalgic look. At his side, like a shadow, was Izumi, Livia's former best friend, also approaching. "Livia," Matteo said in his usual low, seductive voice, "you look even more beautiful than I remember." She stared back at him coldly. "That's because I no longer carry you with me." Izumi tried to step in, mentioning how much she missed her, reminiscing about old times, and admitting past mistakes. But Livia wouldn't allow that fake tenderness to entangle her again. "You two chose to destroy each other, and dragged my trust down with you, but I survived. And contrary to what you both thought, I bloomed."
The air grew tense, smiles froze. Guests nearby whispered to one another. Matteo, still keeping up appearances, made one final attempt. "If you ever want to talk, or even start over."
Before Livia could answer, Ethan stepped forward. With a steady, calm voice, he spoke clearly. "There's nothing to start over, Mr. Ricci. My wife has no interest in revisiting what she has already overcome with courage and dignity. And if you can't see that, perhaps you never truly knew the incredible woman you lost." A respectful silence fell over the room. Matteo stepped back. Izumi looked away. And there, in front of everyone, Ethan stood beside Livia, not just as her husband, but as her shield, and as a witness to her strength. That night changed everything. Noriko, who had also been present, watched the scene attentively. She didn't say anything right away, but something in her posture had softened. For the first time, she saw not only Livia's worth as a woman, but also the loyalty and strength she had awakened in her own son. In the car, on the way home, Ethan held Livia's hand in silence. She gazed out the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and felt something new, freedom. Not just from the past, but from guilt, from fear, from the need to prove anything to anyone. She had faced her ghosts. She had won. Not with shouting, but with grace. Not with revenge, but with truth. And that night, more than ever, she understood that real love doesn't protect us from pain. It walks beside us until pain no longer has a voice. Spring arrived in Kyoto like a silent poem. Cherry blossoms bloomed in pink waves, covering streets, temples, and hills with soft petals that danced in the wind like confetti from a gentle sky. It was the season of new beginnings, and for Livia and Ethan, the moment to seal a union that was no longer symbolic, but visceral, deep, and real. Unlike their first impulsive wedding, held under artificial lights in Tokyo, this second ceremony would be carefully planned. A ritual of honor, belonging, and reverence for their roots. It would take place at the ancestral Nakamura Temple on the shores of Lake Biwa, surrounded by silent mountains and a centuries-old sanctuary. A place where time seemed to pause to contemplate eternity. From the beginning, Livia wanted everything to carry meaning, not tradition for tradition's sake, but a genuine fusion between her Brazilian soul and Ethan's Japanese legacy. She designed her own kimono, hand-embroidered with symbols that told her journey. A bamboo to represent resilience, intertwined ipe and sakura blossoms, and small blue waves, a tribute to the ocean she crossed to find herself. The fabrics came from both Brazil and Japan. Every detail was a tribute to the courage it takes to reinvent yourself. Noriko, as always, watched silently during the kimono fittings. She didn't offer direct compliments, but in the end, quietly asked the seamstress to adjust the collar in a more traditional style, gently touching the fabric with an almost maternal care. It was the closest thing to approval Livia would receive, and it was enough. On the day of the ceremony, the temple was adorned with local flowers and paper lanterns. The guests, few, carefully chosen, and deeply moved, were asked to maintain respectful silence throughout the ritual. A senior monk conducted the ceremony with a serene voice, while Ethan, dressed in a dark blue hakama with the family crest embroidered on his back, waited for the bride in front of the ancient wooden altar. Livia walked slowly down the stone path, flanked by musicians playing koto and shakuhachi. Each step was a farewell to fear and a greeting to new life. The temple bells chimed gently as she stopped before Ethan. He smiled, a calm yet deeply felt smile. The smile of someone who sees not just a woman, but an entire destiny standing before him. The ritual unfolded with reverence, the sharing of sack cups, the offering of branches to the ancestors' altar, the vows spoken in hushed voices, almost whispers, like secrets only time would be able to witness. Ethan promised protection and listening. Livia promised presence and truth. There were no grand declarations, no unrealistic promises. Just two hearts that, after the pain, had chosen to keep walking side by side. At the end of the ceremony, as sakura petals fell like natural blessings over the couple, the guests applauded gently. The scene was almost dreamlike, the lake reflecting the golden light of dusk, the mountains standing guard over the temple like ancient sentinels, and the bride and groom embracing, as if the whole world fit into that single moment. The reception was discreet, held at a traditional ryokan with tatami mats, inner gardens, and a dinner served in small portions that celebrated Japanese cuisine with tropical touches. Every detail had been chosen by Livia, who didn't want to offer a spectacle, but rather a piece of her truth. During the meal, Noriko quietly approached. She sat beside Livia, observed the lantern-lit garden, and said in slow, deliberate Japanese, "You are not what I expected, but you are what my son needed, and now, what our family needs." Then she stood and left, without waiting for a response. Livia remained there, feeling the words echo like a silent seal of acceptance. Later, beside Ethan, lying on a futon beneath the ryokan's old wooden ceiling, Livia listened to the night sounds of the garden, the croak of a frog, the wind rustling the bamboo, the gentle swaying of leaves. She thought of Paris, of the day she boarded a plane not knowing where she was going, only that she had to run. And now, here, with her head resting on Ethan's chest. She felt something she had never felt before. Belonging. It wasn't the wedding she had dreamed of as a little girl. It was better, because it was real, and because she had built every step of the bridge that led her there, with tears, with strength, with faith. And in that moment, as the lanterns flickered outside, she understood. It doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is who walks beside you. The success of the Nagai Michi show was only the beginning. The collection crossed oceans and landed on the pages of major Asian fashion magazines. Critics who were once skeptical now praised the bold cuts, the symbolic depth of the prints, and the elegant cultural fusion. Livia Andrade, the Brazilian who had entered Japan as an uncomfortable secret in the life of a billionaire heir, was now being mentioned as one of the most authentic new voices in contemporary fashion. But she wasn't chasing prestige. She was seeking purpose. With Ethan's support and her newly earned recognition, Livia opened her own studio in Tokyo. She named it Atelier Hikari, light in Japanese, in honor of the light she had discovered within herself after the darkness of the past. The space functioned both as a creative center and as an incubator for young designers and artisans who, like she once had, were trying to start over. A portion of the profit from each collection was redirected to social programs for women's empowerment. Every needle, every fold, every stitch was an act of reconstruction. Her new collection, also called Hikari, was announced months in advance with great anticipation. Its mission was clear: to translate into fabric the journey of a woman who resists, who does not bow, who turns pain into art. The runway shows took place in cities like Osaka, Seoul, and Taipei. Real models, of different body types, ages, and backgrounds, were intentionally selected to break the industry's rigid standards. Livia wasn't just presenting clothes, she was telling stories. During this time, Ethan also found a new balance. For the first time, he no longer saw himself as a prisoner of family expectations. After long conversations with the Nakamura Global Board, and surprisingly with his own mother, he redefined his role in the company. He stepped away from the distant, traditional executive persona to embrace a more innovative and human approach. He launched a social division focused on youth entrepreneurship and began visiting schools, supporting cultural projects, and engaging directly with underserved communities in Japan. Meanwhile, the relationship between him and Livia grew stronger, based on respect, partnership, and mutual admiration. They no longer needed to run away to feel free. They had built a home, not a physical one, but an emotional one, where both their roots fit. Kyoto was the refuge, Tokyo the laboratory of ideas and the world, the stage where they could be themselves, without masks. Livia began to be invited to give talks, attend women entrepreneurs meetings, and participate in panels about diversity in fashion. Whenever she went on stage, she spoke simply, without rehearsed lines. She talked about the girl who sewed doll clothes in the Brazilian countryside, about the dreamlike Paris that turned into a nightmare, about the man who entered her life as a stranger and became her foundation, and about how, amidst it all, she discovered that the greatest stitches we make are internal. They are the ones that mend the heart. At one of these talks, at the end of the event, a young Japanese woman approached her with tears in her eyes, holding a piece of hand-embroidered fabric. This was the first design I managed to finish after a long time. I heard your story and realized I could also create even though I'm broken inside. Arigatou gozaimasu. Livia embraced the girl without saying a word, because at that moment, words weren't necessary. As her influence grew, invitations to expand the brand began to appear. Singapore, Hong Kong, Milan, New York. But Livia wisely declined anything that distanced her from her essence. She preferred to grow slowly, like cherry trees, with deep roots and strong blossoms. Ethan supported every decision. He knew Livia's shine didn't come from fame, but from the coherence between what she lived and what she created. At home, away from the spotlight, the routine was simple. They shared dinners prepared together, evening walks, impromptu Japanese movie sessions, and lazy Sunday mornings. They didn't need grand declarations because their love was made of small gestures, looks that said more than words, hands that found each other, even in silence. One day, sitting on the wooden deck in the Kyoto garden, Ethan watched Livia sketching new designs in her notebook and said, "You know, sometimes I think that night in Tokyo wasn't a coincidence. It was as if the universe really had to break us so we could find each other." She smiled without taking her eyes off the paper. Maybe some falls are just life's way of pushing us forward. And in that serene moment, amidst the rustling leaves and the distant cawing of crows, it became clear that what they had built together was more than a love story. It was a legacy, made not only of achievements, but of light. A year had passed since the traditional wedding at the temple by Lake Biwa. The seasons had completed their full cycle, and with them, Livia and Ethan's life had blossomed at a serene but profound pace. It was summer again, and the Kyoto garden was filled with vivid colors, butterflies, and the soft fragrance of green tea that Noriko now naturally prepared for the couple. Their words to each other were still few, but the gestures, those spoke with the lightness of those who have finally learned to accept. On the morning the news arrived, the sky was clear and the wind blew gently. Livia left the clinic with a quiet smile on her lips and her eyes moist. She didn't say anything immediately. She just walked to the cafe where Ethan was waiting, sat down in front of him, gently took his hand, and whispered with a choked voice, "We're going to be 3. For a moment, he was silent, as if absorbing every syllable of that phrase. Then, unable to contain his emotion, he leaned over the table and hugged her firmly. There were no shouts of celebration or theatrical euphoria, just a silence full of meaning, like a temple where only gratitude has a voice. Livia's pregnancy was accompanied with respect, care, and wonder. Noriko, now much closer, made a point of organizing the child's first blessing rituals, according to the Nakamura family traditions. The welcome tea ceremony took place in the inner garden, with paper lanterns and silent prayers. Livia's atelier was temporarily transformed into a lighter space, where she continued designing, now inspired by the soft shapes of motherhood. She chose not to stop working, but to slow down. The new collection was named Roots in Motion, a series of pieces inspired by the transformation of a woman through motherhood, not as a loss of identity, but as an expansion. Light lace, flowing fabrics, soft tones. It was, more than ever, a celebration of women in all their phases. Ethan, for his part, discovered new ways to love. He started arriving home earlier, preparing tea for her at dusk, sitting with Livia in the garden while she sketched with one hand and caressed her belly with the other. At night, he read children's stories even before their daughter was born, as if her presence already filled every corner of the house. Aiko was born on a quiet, early morning at a traditional Kyoto hospital. The doctors and nurses moved with precision and calm. Ethan was by Livia's side the entire time, holding her hand firmly and tenderly, whispering words of encouragement in Portuguese and Japanese. When Aiko came into the world, wrapped in warmth and light, she seemed to carry in her eyes the peace of the two worlds that had created her. The name Aiko was chosen by both with affection. In Japanese, it means beloved child. But for Livia, it also represented rebirth, hers, Ethan's, and the very story they had rewritten together. Aiko was the symbol of the union of two cultures, two pasts, and one single truth, the love they decided to live, despite all odds. The first months were intense, but magical. Aiko was a serene child with the almond-shaped, deep eyes of Ethan, but with Livia's light and disarming smile. Noriko held her in her arms with restrained pride, as if guarding a precious secret. The house staff began referring to the little girl as the new flower of the garden, and the days gained a sweeter rhythm with her presence. Livia, despite sleepless nights and the exhaustion of motherhood, felt complete. There were no longer gaps inside her, no open wounds. Matteo and Izumi no longer had space in her memory. Paris was just a distant memory of an old version of herself. Now the present was all that mattered. One night, sitting on the house deck with Aiko asleep in her arms and Ethan leaning beside her, Livia watched the reflection of the moon on the lake far away. She whispered, "If someone had told me on that flight from Paris to Tokyo that all this awaited me, I would have laughed." Ethan answered with a low and steady voice, "I never imagined that running away from who I was would lead me to what I most needed." They looked at each other for a moment, in silence. And in that exchange of glances was everything that words could not hold. The pain overcome, the risks taken, the patient construction of a life made of choice, not convenience, nor imposed fate, but freedom. Livia then looked at Aiko, peacefully breathing in her arms, and smiled. Because she understood, once and for all, that true happiness is not in luxury, fame, or applause. It is in the freedom to love, to make mistakes, to start over, and one day, to look back and know, I chose to live all of this, even if it began with the most impulsive decision of my life. So, did you like this story full of twists, love, and courage? If you vibed with Livia and Ethan's journey, you know what to do. Drop that slick like to show you want more stories like this here on the channel. And don't forget to subscribe, because that's how you stay tuned to all the emotions, secrets, and romances we bring every week. Oh, and hit the bell. That way, whenever a new story drops, you're the first to know. No spoilers, just surprises. Now tell me in the comments, which moment of this story made your heart beat faster? I want to know everything. Thanks so much for watching till the end, you're amazing. See you in the next video, full of emotion and that special touch only we know how to give. Bye-bye.